Welcome back to the Live with Grace podcast, where we discuss sports, lessons, and life as athletes, professionals, creators, dreamers, and leaders. I'm Grace Beyer, and I'm your host, and I'm so happy you're here. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Live with Grace podcast. Today on the show, my voice is a little bit different / slightly gone because I've been coaching. I've been working for a company called Point Guard College, and I just woke up this morning after a great week and my voice sounded like this, but still had to record the episode because I told myself I was going to, and that's something that's really important to me. When I tell myself I'm going to do something, I like to follow through with that. So here we are. And today on the show, I'm recording my 50th podcast episode, which is unreal. I'm so excited. I'm so grateful to have reached this milestone. It was really my goal to have 50 podcast episodes by the time that I went back to school, but I was able to connect with some amazing people before that and able to pump out some really good episodes and reach this milestone before I even intended to. So I'm super grateful. I'm super excited. And I just feel overall really blessed to have this platform and to have the stamina to be able to continue to push out content that is meaningful to me and that could possibly help other athletes. I recently learned that only 11% of podcasts that start out make it to 50 episodes, which just goes to show how much work and how much commitment it really does take to reach that milestone. But also, it goes to show that when you have a really good support system, you can do things that are difficult to do. And so that's really a shout out to all of y'all who listen to this podcast, support the podcast, share it, talk about it, any type of support. I'm just so grateful, and I wouldn't have been able to reach this milestone without you guys. So thank you so much, and I hope that you guys are continuing to get value and to help you in your life, to help you in your athletic career, or whatever you're pursuing. Today on the show, I am going to call this episode Grace Along the Journey because it's kind of a special episode in being the 50th. I have other ones I could have posted, but I really wanted this one to be special and specific to 50, number 50, it being a milestone, all of that. So I want to call this episode Grace Along the Journey because that's one thing that I've been learning, stretching myself to do better at is giving myself grace along the journey. And I know that's also my name, but I really do mean it in the sense of giving yourself not leeway, not allowing yourself, like, it's not holding yourself accountable, but it's just if you're not perfect right away or you're starting something new and you don't get it right away, not being so harsh and so quick to criticize yourself. So ahead for the podcast and all that I'm excited for with that. Lately, like I said, with losing my voice, I've been stepping into some new spaces in my career, quote unquote, but really just within my life, I've just been pursuing new things. And one of those things was working for Point Guard College. It was my first time ever coaching or directly working under someone or working with a team of people in such a credited company and well-known company, and also it was my first time ever coaching. So it was a lot of firsts for me, and Point Guard College was they don't like to call it a camp, but it's basically a camp, a week long, that is like a college level environment for young athletes that are in middle school and high school who have college basketball or beyond aspirations. So it's very structured. It's a lot of basketball. You have 2 to 3 classroom sessions every day that are at least an hour long. And everything is back to back to back. It's a lot of discipline for these young athletes who a lot of them have never really been in that situation before. And for me, I wanted to go back and work for Point Guard College because I thought that it would be a great opportunity for me to push myself in the sense of being a leader and being vocal and talking and leading these young athletes and inspiring them to get to their highest potential within the week that I was coaching them, and also beyond that. And it was really, really rewarding, and I'm so grateful looking back on that. But at the same time, I'm starting another pursuit it's working for a company called Viz, which stands for Voice in Sport, which covers women in sports. And so both of these opportunities, my third week of Point Guard College and my first week at Viz, were conflicting at the same time. So I had 4 different meetings for Viz, and the Point Guard College days are up to 12 to 14, 15-hour days sometimes, because you're always on duty, you're always watching the kids, even when you're not in the gym or whatever it may be. So my first meeting with Viz, we had to, listen to all the intro information, and we were supposed to have a slide prepared to introduce ourselves. And I was kind of toward the end, and this was between a classroom or gym session and dinner, a time like maybe I think we had to be back in the gym around 6. And so I had a good hour to hour and a half to be on this meeting in between. And when it got to my turn, I'm so used to talking, especially because it was a Zoom call. I'm so used to talking on this podcast or just talking in general. I feel like I've developed the skill of quote unquote public speaking, but being able to speak clearly and confidently and all that. But when I was on this call, I was juggling my computer connection not working, my phone glitching and being on low battery, and in the back of my head, kind of feeling rushed and having to get to the next place, and being a little bit tired because we had trained or played basketball the night before, and all these things I was juggling. And so when it was finally my turn, I wasn't, I was, I don't know how to say this. I wasn't the calmest, confident, and most clear speaker that I hold myself to a standard of being. And I was so tempted to be so hard on myself afterwards, because a first impression is very important to me. And in my head, it kind of painted me as being very nervous or not sure of myself. And that's not how I felt at all. I was just very overwhelmed with all the other things I had going on at the time. And so I wanted to talk about this because my voice is really bad. I don't know if this is going anywhere. But I wanted to talk about this because it ties back to giving yourself grace. I ended up talking to someone on the phone afterwards as I was walking/rushing to the gym. And I made a conscious choice that I wasn't going to criticize myself just because I was doing my best in that specific moment. And so the next day, 2 days later actually, we had our meeting for the internship, specifically for my group of writers. And they gave us a lot of information. This meeting was supposed to be an hour and a half, and it ended up running over time to be about 2 hours, and ran right into my next gym session. And I think anyone that's in a high level environment or is working in a healthy culture, they value being on time places and being prepared and being high energy all the time. But in this specific moment, I was rushing to the gym again with my Zoom call. I had switched to my phone, and I was feeling very overwhelmed because I was going into my third 2-hour gym session of the day. I had just been given 2 hours straight of new information to try to process and remember. And also, I didn't have any time within the time that was supposed to be my break or my small rest in between sessions to actually breathe. I came straight back to the dorm and jumped straight on the call to get this information. And so the whole day I was on go, 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 go. And so as I was walking to the gym, I felt so overwhelmed to the point where I just felt like I was going to break down. Like I didn't feel prepared to go in and have the level-headedness and calmness, and I would say the right word is poise. I didn't have the poise in that moment to go and coach and lead these 20 girls that I coached throughout the course of this week. But then I got inside, and to the grace of God, or just people being amazing people, my basket was the most energized, the loudest, the most encouraging basket that we have been that whole entire week. And it was that session that I have really needed that extra pick me up. And so sometimes I think the message behind all of this is all you can do is your best. It goes back to a book that I read that is a famous book. It's called The Four Agreements. And the fourth agreement sounds very straightforward. It's just do your best. That's the other ones are things like don't take things personal, be impeccable with your word, don't make assumptions. But this one, do your best. It's pretty straightforward. But one thing that really struck me in that book was you can't do anything more than your best. You can only do your best in any situation. And that was how I felt in that moment, that maybe under different circumstances, my best would have looked different. But given all of the information and the circumstances and the energy that I had already expended that day, I was proud of myself. Maybe proud isn't the right word, but I was happy and grateful to be able to still show up and give energy, to be able to receive energy from other people too, and allow even the athletes and the energy in the gym to pour into my cup that felt depleted before I walked into that gym was very encouraging, healing, and just taught me a valuable lesson about you don't need to be so hard on yourself all the time, especially for most of the people listening to this podcast. Like the shirt says, it's athletes, dreamers, and leaders. All of us are highly, highly ambitious people with a lot of goals, and a lot of these goals aren't just within sports. My goals within sports have to do with my training, the film I watch, how I take care of my body, my shooting workouts, playing pickup, all these types of things that are in a block of my brain or in my schedule that is my preparation for next season. But I also have all these other things that I'm really interested about and that are really worth my energy and I guess energy is the right word for that. And so in juggling all of these different things that are all highly valuable and important to me, there's times when you might not be able to give 100% of your heart or of your energy into one thing because you've already had to spread that energy into all these different buckets or categories. And that's completely okay. So the main message of these two stories is that, first of all, to criticize yourself less. I think we're grown up, especially in America. I can't speak as much for other places because I didn't grow up in other places. But in America, we grow up in this culture where you want to grind, hustle, work really, really hard to get what you want, which is really beautiful and healthy in a sense. But at the same time, there's this balance of not pushing yourself to the point of, and I actually have a podcast, how to hold yourself accountable without tearing yourself apart. There's a balance of how do you continue to hold yourself accountable without being so hard and critical of yourself. Another book that I read called You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. I recommend it. It's very interesting and healing as a book. She has a belief that you should never criticize yourself, which is very foreign to us if we've grown up in this culture of being our biggest cheerleader and biggest critic. And I think it also is a trait of a lot of very highly ambitious and go-getting type of people. But my message is that you're doing good, you're doing great, you're right where you need to be, and to afford yourself, and I'm actually speaking to myself too, this is an area of growth for me, to afford yourself some grace and some forgiveness and some growing room. Like when you get a new pair of shoes, especially as a kid, you don't want to get them so that they fit exactly perfectly and the toe cuts off right at your foot because you know that your feet are going to probably grow in a few months to a year. And if you want those shoes to last, you're going to give yourself a little bit of room. That's the same with this. You're going to give yourself, in stepping into a new space, sometimes things are uncomfortable and things are new, and that's a beautiful thing, but also in them being new, you have to learn how to adjust. You have to learn how to grow into that shoe. You have to learn how to grow into those new clothes or into that new environment that you're in. And it's going to benefit you in the long run. But in the moment, it's going to be uncomfortable. And if you're always criticizing yourself so much to the point that it's detrimental, then you're not going to be able to grow as freely, as strong, as beautiful as you would have had you given yourself a little bit of grace. Another analogy, if you think of a plant, imagine if a plant, every single time they didn't grow the exact amount that they needed to grow that day, you crushed them down a little bit, or you crushed them down to the size that they were before. They're never going to be able to grow because you keep damaging them along the way. That's the same concept as this, in that you can't keep pushing yourself down while you're trying to grow. It's counterproductive at the end of the day. And so I really hope that in hearing these stories, in whatever pursuit you are going after, whether it be sports alone, whether it be sports in a career, whether it be school, whether it be art, photography, poetry, writing, any type of hobby or thing that is really important to you, I hope that you give yourself a little bit more grace after listening to this episode. Even me, on a normal day, I wouldn't want to record or post this episode because my voice isn't perfect. And I wouldn't want someone to criticize or judge the podcast based off of that, which is kind of crazy to even fathom or think about, because I don't think most people would even cross their head. But I just hold this podcast to a certain quality or standard that I want it to meet, so that I know that if it's somebody's first time listening to my podcast, they get a quality experience every single time. And so that's why I kind of debriefed it with this. But then at the same time, I'm going to give myself room to grow because, like I said, I am pouring my energy into so many different spaces, but yet still have the discipline to show up to this podcast because it is something that's very important to me. And I think that just showing up and doing your best in that moment, being fully honest with yourself is another thing. But being fully honest with yourself, giving your best, and showing up is something to celebrate, no matter how it looks, no matter if it looks like it did yesterday or last month when you may have had a little bit more energy. It's all pushing you forward in your specific journey. So giving grace along the journey, giving yourself growing room, giving yourself growing space, not still holding yourself to the standard. I'm still holding myself to a standard of showing up for this podcast. I'm not gonna neglect it just because I'm tired, or just because I have a lot of other things going on, or just because my voice isn't 100%. But I'm also not going to be so perfectionist about it that it's detrimental to the growth of the podcast or the growth of my athletic career or whatever the case may be. I actually have one last story. It just popped in my head. Also, over the course of these last couple weeks, we've been working at different universities, and the 3 that I've worked at have all been in Florida, which has been really cool. I've got to go to different parts of Florida. But I have this strength program that I've been following to, like I said, in the box of my season preparation, prepare myself physically for the season. And the last 2 weeks, the schools have not given us access to their weight rooms. And so that kind of threw me for a spin. Not only did I have little to no time during the day to lift, also I didn't even have access to a weight room. Whereas before, I would have been so harsh on myself to be on catch-up mode. I recognized that in those moments I was doing my best to get those lifts. Like before the session, I would get a lift in at a random gym in whatever city I was in, or I would do my best to keep my body active and stretch and foam roll and just continue to take care of it, to put good food in my body, to just do the best with what I had in those moments, because ultimately that's all we can do. It's not always going to look perfect. We're not always going to have all the resources. We're not always going to have the perfect setup, the ideal weather, whatever it may be. But I think it was another very important part of my journey, just now me recognizing that I'm not as hard on myself as I was before, in the sense of it being a detrimental criticism of myself. I still, like I said, am showing up. I still lifted when I got back home yesterday, but I'm not going to kill my body, because at the same time I recognize that in doing my best to coach and show up for the people that I was working for and pouring into, my body is tired, my mind is tired, my voice is depleted almost. And so we're picking it back up this week, and I'm going to have a great rest of this month. Very focused, back in my routine, and not skip a beat. And if anything, be better for it, because I had those experiences that were just as important to my journey as those couple lifts that I might have missed during the week. So, like I said, thank you all so much, so much for continuing to share the podcast, support the podcast, reach out to me with feedback, listen to the podcast, and just being along for this journey. And I hope, like I said, I hope that this podcast has helped you in some way along your journey, no matter what that may be. The last thing I wanted to cover was just a small look ahead into the future of the podcast. I'm still working out the exact schedule of how I want to post everything, but I know coming up I'm going to have some really special guests that are in the professional sports industry, and I am also recording about some really important topics on youth sports and identity and relationships with parents and AAU, and not relationships, but the role of parents in young kids' athletic journeys, and all these different topics I'm going to cover. I'm also consciously or intentionally looking to expand my network on this podcast. And so if you have anyone that you see would be a really great fit to grow the podcast and to reach athletes on an even deeper and wider level, please reach out to me with that. That would be highly, highly appreciated. And yeah, thank you all again for the third time so much for all the support, and super excited to have reached 50 episodes. And without further ado, stay tuned for the next episode on the Live with Grace podcast.